So this afternoon, we've got folks here from the Natural Resources Board who are going to walk us through a report that we've talked about, we haven't looked at it or been through it. We're going to hear directly from the authors, I think, and have about an hour set aside for that presentation, and then kind of hopefully questions and discussion afterwards. And before we get started, we'll, I think, introduce ourselves, and I'll just go around the table, and then if we can hear from your staff. Commissioner, is that your title? No.
No, I'm chair.
Chair, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm Sabina Haskell, Chair of the Natural Resources Board. I've been in my role for a year, and I've had a lot of different types of background jobs that where paths have crossed. I used to live down in Bennington County and was at the Banner and at the Reformer and at the Herald and at the Journal and worked for Fairpoint and different things. So I've lived everywhere in the state except the Northeast Kingdom. So nice to meet everyone.
And yeah, why don't you go ahead and introduce folks with you.
Pete, yeah.
Pete Gill, the now Executive Director of the Natural Resources Board. Work on the overall operations of the organization. I've been here for 2 months. But with that said, I was with Act 250 as Associate General Counsel for about 8 years prior to that. In the interim, I worked on legal and regulatory matters for Norwich University.
Still in the flying pig.
I'm Allison Milbury-Stone. I'm General Counsel for the Natural Resources Board. So I advise our Chair and Executive Director and the board generally, as well as our district commissions and coordinators, and represent our agency in appeals of permitting decisions or enforcement decisions in Vermont Superior Court and the Environmental Division. I've been around with the NRB for about pushing 2 years.
Going on 2 years.
2 years. And prior to that, I was at the Attorney General's office in the Environmental Division. Actually worked with the Agency of Agriculture in that capacity and was in private practice before that. So thanks for having us.
Thank you. And then we've got a couple of guests. We all met Steve a week or so ago. You don't need to introduce yourself again.
You knew I wouldn't stop.
And then we have another guest over here. If you mind telling us who you are.
Yeah, hi, I'm Carrie Brosnan, and I'm a legislative intern with Vermont Natural Resources Council, BPA, and DCP.
And I'm David Durkee. I'm the chair of the committee from Shaftesbury, represent Glastonbury and Sunderland as well. And we'll just go around and we'll quickly introduce ourselves.
Rodney Graham, I represent Orange 3, which is.
Yeah, Jed Lipsky, Lamoille 1, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
And Stowe, 1 town.
Henry Pearl, I represent the towns of Danville, Peacham, and Cabot.
Charles Wilson, I'm from Caledonia 3, which is Linden, Sheffield, Wheelock, Sutton, and Newark.
David Templeman, another Northeast Kingdom resident and representative, Brownington, Barton, and Westmore.
I'm Josie Levitt, Grandel Chittenden, which is all of Grandel County and a little bit of West Milton.
Nice to see you.
Mike Rice, Bennington, Rutland District, Danby, Dorset, Landgrove, Mount Tabor, and Peru.
John O'Brien, Royal French.
Esme Cole, Hartford.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I did look everybody up ahead of time, so it's nice to see you in person.
Just one thing, we're having a little tech issue.
Yeah.
But I think we're still live streaming, so we can keep going. Laura, does that sound right?
It looks.
I'm not entirely sure.
It does say live on this
I
screen.
believe we're still live.
Okay, we'll hear soon.
But there's no visuals. That's
Yeah.
okay.
We, however, do have your report.
Yep.
So,
I did bring one extra copy.
okay, great, yes. That report was under reports. I think I'll find it there.
Yep.
Maybe under today too.
We submitted it to the legislature on Friday the 13th. And then provided copies to the chair and to your committee assistant as well. This is a report that was part of Act 182 of last year. There were 3 reports. Act 182 was the housing bill with NDAs, et cetera. But 3 reports were required in that act. The first one was Act 250 jurisdiction over agricultural businesses. The second one is being done by Agency of Commerce and Community Development and is due December-ish on designations. And then we have the third bill that's due December 31st of this year on necessary updates to the Act 250 program is the name of the study. That will, while we talk about all these things, these other 2 studies will be part of the informing of that final study as well, because there's so many different pieces to that, as you can well imagine. But do you want me to keep going?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it okay for you without having the?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I have the easy part.
Okay. Yeah, we can all look at, as long as we have it.
Yeah.
Some kind of a device. If there are questions from members of the committee, raise your hand. Let me
Yes,
know.
please. Yes. Yeah. Interrupt anytime, please. I just thought I would start by telling you how we got this study off the ground. It was July 1 when the act was, came into law. And we started meeting weekly with our colleagues at AAFM to start to plan the report, the directives, the objectives, and we worked together to plan surveys for both the farming community and for the municipalities. And from there, that information that we got helped us focus with 5 objectives for the report. And one is to the appropriate land uses for on-farm businesses, and to preserve farmland and increase viability of farms. The knowledge of resources and needs, the opportunities and the barriers to growth in the agricultural industry. A big one, regulatory consistency and certainty for on-farm businesses that allow the operations to grow in place and at the appropriate scale. And another big one, mutual understanding of the terms used across the regulatory jurisdictions, because there are 3. Act 143, and then us, of course, Act 250. And then finally, to modernize and update and support ag and farming, because it's kind of at a crossroads. I don't think I need to tell you all that, right? So from there, we planned and held 3 2-hour stakeholder meetings. One in September, one in October, one in November. And we discussed these objectives. We got feedback from over 50 stakeholders in that process. And some themes emerged. And after each meeting, we would pull together the input and the feedback, and that would set the agenda, if you will, for the next meeting to continue to build the discussion and the focus. So during the 3 stakeholder meetings, we met as big groups, all 50 of us in the big Teams rooms, and we also broke out into individual meeting rooms and had smaller discussions, and then came back with what each of those groups had and talked about it as a larger group. And from these discussions, several themes emerged. And these are things that the legislature has dealt with, I know, for a number of sessions, but the compliance with and the administration tracking of principally produced products on the farms, also known as the 50% rule, is challenging both for farmers and for regulators. There was a desire to have consistency and clarity between all the regulating bodies, which I just mentioned, Ag, Us, and Act 143, so that it's not duplicative and it's more understandable. And then there was, and again, this is a little bit redundant, but there's, some concerns about the complexity of the land use regulation when there's oversight from the three entities. So from there, the stakeholders, those became the themes. And from there, the stakeholders talked about possible areas to, I'm going to air quotes here, fix those three things that seem to be frustrating. While still supporting farming and having the appropriate oversight from an environmental standpoint. So now I get to pass the baton to Pete, who's going to talk about the current situation. Yes.
Representative O'Brien?
Can you just back up a minute? Where did the legislative charge for these meetings come from? Was it here? Like, I just don't remember us saying, you spend your summer working on this. We certainly talked about all these things.
Right. It was put into Act 182. It starts on page 64. The charge to do this study. Yes. So that's where it came from. But my understanding from one of the stakeholders that participated in this process, who had also been involved with working with the legislature over several sessions, was that you all really, really worked hard and debated the 50% rule or the principally produced and qualifying products and all that. And it wasn't easy for you. And she was quite, direct, saying, this has been something that you all have been trying to make fit, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Yeah.
So is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, like we talked, you were in over the whole Franklin County Airport thing. That was one thing you may have weighed in on.
I don't know that I did.
And I know.
Okay, oh yeah, that's right, sorry.
Yes. And I remember you also, I think, on accessory on-farm business, there was the restaurant in Woodstock, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, I'm sure.
Yes, the restaurant, Peacefield Farm, right. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
This is part of the housing bill. It was.
Act 182, yes.
Which was never in here, right?
I don't know.
That's why I always.
Yeah. It
was S226 from last session.
Yeah.
It became 182. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, I was going to say, we didn't know it as Act. We knew it as something that I was about to say started with H, but no, it was S.
Oh,
and it was a housing bill, but it was picked up from another bill, I believe. We don't need to rehash all of that, but in any case, it was in a bill that we passed.
Yep. Okay. So I was going to let Pete take the chair and talk to you about the current situation with farming, Act 250 jurisdiction, exemptions, that type of thing. And then Allison will go from there and talk about what those potential options were that came up through the stakeholder process. And Steve Collier, I'm sure, will want to weigh in on some of those. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. Yeah, thanks for having us. Like Sabina said, I am going to go through kind of the current landscape. And apologies, we don't have it up on the screen. It says live on my screen, so I'm assuming that those who are watching in have access to this. But yeah, I'll start with two areas that I want to go through in terms of what kind of the legal framework is or landscape at the moment on AOFBs. One is the Act 250 side of things, and the other is the municipal side of things. So I'll touch on both of those. I was reading something this week that was saying people need to hear something 7 times to internalize it. I'll try not to repeat things 7 times, but certainly, especially since you don't have a visual up there, if you need me to slow down or want to talk about an issue, just feel free to interrupt. So on the Act 250 side, AOFBs, I'll start off with 2 points right away. By statute, farming is exempt from Act 250 permitting under the definition of farming for Act 250. And also, we don't have a definition for AOFBs or accessory on-farm businesses in Act 250, just to kind of let that, or set that groundwork there. So when you're talking about Act 250 and businesses that might be on farming properties, I'm trying to kind of narrow this into that framework there. You have a trigger for development, so construction of improvements for a commercial purpose on a farm may trigger Act 250 permit requirements. So if you think, so for example, to kind of put some flesh on that, if you have a farm property and you want to put a mechanic shop on that farming property, it's for a commercial purpose, right? It may trigger Act 250 jurisdiction, even though it's on a farm, even though you have an exemption for farming in Act 250 permitting.
Sorry, just following up on that question then. If the mechanical shop is to solely deal with the farm's own equipment, does that make a difference?
So if it is, if it would be, just the farmer working on their own machines, those types of things, that would be separate. If they are running a business where they're repairing machines, that would likely trigger Act 250. All of these things, I'm saying these things with a big, broad brush. For any particular determination whether Act 250 jurisdiction applies to a particular property, you'd want to contact your district coordinator. So we have, back up here a little bit on Act 250 land, but we've got 9 different districts throughout the state, and there's a district coordinator that will address jurisdictional concerns through a jurisdictional opinion for any property within their jurisdiction.
Good, thank you.
So what does farming include? Well, there's a portion that I want to pinpoint because it's related to the accessory on-farm business piece of things, and so I'll just say that there are multiple things within the statute definition that are qualify as farming and therefore be exempt to Act 250. The one that's most related to our topic today is the on-site storage, preparation, and sale of agricultural products principally produced on the farm. So just to keep that term in mind, principally produced, let me flesh that one out a little bit more for you. So principally produced for Act 250 purposes means more than 50% by either weight or volume of the ingredients or materials contributing to a final agricultural product or products which result from farming and which is stored, prepared, or sold at the farm, is grown or produced on the farm. So that's a definition in the NRB rules of what principally produced means. Pause there for a minute because it takes a little bit to digest. But you can think of 50% or more by weight or volume as you're thinking of that, thinking of those agricultural products, maybe it's your blueberry pie or something that you're picking those blueberries or raising those blueberries on the farm. They're contributing in, and determining, maybe you're buying your crust, but you've got 50% by weight or volume of the final agricultural product is your blueberries, and therefore you would not be, you would be principally produced on the farm, then in which case you would be farming, in which case you would be exempt from Act 250 for that.
We've got a question here, a couple maybe, Representative Pearl.
Can you just remind us where water falls within that?
Good question. So there was a decision in the Whistle Pig that went through, and I'm just going to draw on Allison, our guru on that particular case. Make sure I get that right.
Allison, do you want to? There's another chair there if you want to.
Slide in.
Sure. Oh, wait a second.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, in terms of Whistle Pig.
Yeah, the Whistle Pig whiskey case, which went to what which looked at what products you would count towards that 50%, whether 50% of the final product was made from things produced on the farm. And the question arose as to whether water should be part of that calculus as something that came directly from the farm, and the answer was no, that you don't include water as part of, as something that was principally produced on the farm. But that was a judicial decision, so it could be. If there was an appetite to have it be different, that could be legislatively changed, but that was how the court concluded the law should be interpreted.
So if you, just following up on that, like, I think, because we've talked about this in the past, but I just want to make sure I've got it right, but like, I don't think there's any cranberry farms in Vermont, but in the example of like a juice, if it's, where there's a small concentration of juice and the majority is water, the water is not included in that. If you get if it's 5% juice and you get 4% of that principally produced and 1% you buy in and the rest of the water is bought in, you're still principally produced, correct? Sorry, we love examples.
Yeah. Maybe it would be worth pulling up the actual case, yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's something to revisit or Steve.
I don't think it's principally produced if it's more water that you brought in, yeah.
I can help if you want.
Please.
So, hi everyone, Steve Collier from the Agency of Agriculture. The reality is, as I see it, is that you cannot produce an agricultural product that is a majority of water. So if you wanted to make, and have it in farming, so if you wanted to make, say, maple seltzer, and that was 90% water and 10% syrup or sap, it would never be an agricultural product because of the way the Superior Court interpreted what principally produced is. I don't personally think that's ever what the NRB rule was intended to do. I don't think it intended to address water at all. It doesn't explicitly address water, but the way the Superior Court interpreted it, water is an ingredient. It's not a farm-produced ingredient. So whenever you have a beverage, essentially, that's not something like cider, that's 100% apples. If you have any beverage that's a majority of water, it's not an agricultural product, which is something that we think is not really the way it should be.
So,
because, yeah.
Thanks for clarifying, because I think I misinterpreted your response. It sounded like you were saying that the whiskey would qualify as an agricultural product, but no, I misunderstood.
No, sorry, I was saying it wouldn't count towards, like, water doesn't count as an agricultural product coming from the farm, so.
Okay, thank you for clarifying it. Representative Pearl, does that answer your?
I just have to throw one more thing. If the water comes from the farm, does that change it?
No, that was the argument that Whistle Pig would.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you didn't make the water, it was there.
Right. Representative O'Brien.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see where you're, yeah, okay.
And then to take it one step further, if I put a cider mill in, use my own apples, that's agricultural, it meets the 50%. But if I bring Henry's apples in and press them, that might trigger Act 250, right?
Potentially. So I'm going to just ask that we direct questions to the witnesses, and if the witnesses aren't, if we can change witnesses too, if we need to get into more about this specific topic, but if that's okay with you all, thank you for.
Yeah, and I think we can answer this one. That I appreciate the flexibility and input from everybody on this one. So on the apples piece, if you're getting them from other farms, so the definition on principally produced says sold at the farm. So which one? Yeah, maybe I'll just read through it again here. So more than 50% by either weight or volume of the ingredients or materials, so the apples, contributing to a final agricultural product, your cider, or products which result from farming, which is, again, farming, remember, is the on-site storage, preparation, sale of agricultural products, principally produced on the farm, and which is stored, prepared, or sold at the farm, is grown or produced on the farm. So I think in that scenario, we're not, it's Yeah, it would be, I don't think our rules allow for, products coming from other farms.
Unless they're less than 50%.
Yeah,
Right.
right, there's that flexibility within the 50% range, but yeah.
10 apples from your farm, 2 from your buddy.
Right. Or people made ice cream and brought some other milk in or cream, whatever, and there are all these, that's what we'd call agriculture, right? But as far as this strict definition goes, it would perhaps trigger Act 250.
Yeah, so it allows some flexibility because of the 50%, but, yeah, not total flexibility.
Representative Templeman Rice, I'm not sure who was first, but.
Maybe Rice.
Somewhat related, sorry, to the off-farm versus on-farm, but in the context of a farm that builds a farm stand, and they're selling both their products and products purchased in from other farms. First of all, just to clarify that my understanding is correct, they would have to make sure that it's 50% plus their products being sold at that farm stand to have it exempt. And then how does it work by weight or volume? You know, if a farmer raises beef cattle and they're bringing in herbs, is it still 50% by weight? You know, like is that, or is there a volume, and does volume apply to volume of, you know, to price at all, or is it only the sort of measurement of, yeah?
Yeah, so good question. So it is in Act 250 land, we haven't gotten over to the municipal side, but it is, you know, by weight or volume. And so that is how it's been applied, and cost does not come into that equation.
Representative Templeman.
So far, we've been talking about inanimate objects. When we bring in livestock, so for example, a farmer purchases 50 sheep, he holds them in his barn for 2 days and then sells them. Is that 100% his product or 0% his product?
Did the check clear? I think there might be some case law on that. I might want to, you know the answer.
I don't know if there's case law. I mean, what we're getting into is very fact specific, and, you know, applying these. And I think really what's coming out is this is complicated. This is, it is very fact specific. And I think the reason that the study was put out there is because we need to drill into some of these issues. We need to figure out what the reality is on the ground so that we can make progress and make it workable for those that that are supporting us.
Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, I'm not trying to complicate this, but in Lamoille County where I live, we're all very dependent on farm stands. Many of these for fresher produce. A lot of these farm stands are affiliated with some of the Mennonite community and farms, which are very active. They happen to get a lot of peaches or some fruits from Pennsylvania in season. They're very apricots, this sort of thing. Are you implying all those little farm stands, and some of them could be the size of, we used to have a thing called telephone booth, but if you put 4 telephone booths together, that's a farm up the road from me that, you know, they produce their eggs, but they could also have fruit that didn't come from the farm. Is that, they need some special permit for that, you know, 100 square feet of structure that houses that fruit stand?
And so there may be some that trigger and some that don't. It's, again, you know, very fact specific in terms of whether it does or doesn't. And then again, you know, in terms of the reality of how this works, it depends on it depends on those various facts of what that instance is, and we'd have to look at that. But again, this is why we're looking at this and trying to see how we can make it reasonable in terms of its applicability.
Yeah, so, I mean, this conversation is just pretty good illustration of, I think, why the legislature asked to have you put this report together.
Exactly.
So why don't you keep going, and we will have more questions, I'm sure, but why don't you keep going?
So I appreciate the questions, and let me follow through on the rest of the kind of the Act 250 side of things, just in terms of the general regulatory landscape. So the last piece that I just wanted to note was, when you have a development on a farm, only those portions of the parcel or the tract that support the development are subject to the regulations, the Act 250 regulations. So it's whereas in other instances, it might be the entire tract in these instances, when it's on a farm, that development, then the jurisdiction is over that particular area prescribed. Okay. So that's, again, high level, general overview of the landscape on the Act 250 side of things. I'll move into the municipal review of AOFDs. Sorry, right there.
That's fine. I just
and I'll just note on this side of things, there are definitions for accessory on-farm businesses. Again, on the municipal side. So, and it states, there's no bylaw shall have the effect of prohibiting an accessory on-farm business. So to be eligible as an AOFB, the farm must be subject to the required agricultural practices, or you might have heard of RAP, and those rules, and operated by the owner, residents, or lessee of the farm, and meet the Act 250 definition of farming. So what is an accessory on-farm business in the municipal context? Well, it's defined as meaning an activity that is an accessory to a farm and comprises of one or both of the following. One is the storage, preparation, processing, and sale of qualifying products, provided that no more than 50% of the total annual sales are from qualifying products that are produced on the farm at the business, at which the business is located. And then two, and this, broadens a little bit. You've got educational, recreational, or social events that feature agricultural practices or qualifying products, or both. Such events may include tours of the farm, farm stays, tastings, and meals featuring qualifying products, and classes or exhibits in the preparation, processing, or harvesting of qualifying products. So let me pause there for a moment.
So while you're pausing, these are examples, or this explains what qualifies an accessory on-farm business. And the bullet point above says that if you do have one of those, there's no municipal bylaw that can restrict what you're doing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
can't prohibit it.
The effect of prohibit.
Can't prohibit it.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, so you can see how this is distinct from Act 250 in terms of its regulation. One, just the existence of a definition on accessory on-farm business. Let me move to the next. In that definition, you notice qualifying products. Let me discuss what those are. So it's a product that is wholly in agricultural, horticultural, viticultural, or dairy commodity, or maple. I'm sure there's something in the way there on that one. Maple syrup, probably. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Livestock or cultured fish or product thereof, a product of poultry, bees, or orchard or fiber crops, a commodity otherwise grown or raised on a farm, or a product manufactured in one or more farms from commodities wholly grown or raised in one or more of the farms. So those would all be your qualifying products. A couple other things to note in the municipal side of the statute here is an accessory on-farm business may take place inside new or existing structures or on the land. The activities of an accessory on-farm business may be subject to site plan review. So there is some level the municipalities may regulate there. And the municipalities may adopt a bylaw concerning accessory on-farm businesses that are no less restrictive. And then there's one last point here on this slide is that there is a training obligation by the Agricultural Food and Markets, the Agency of Agricultural Food and Markets, to provide periodic written notification and training sessions to farms subject to the RAP rules on the existence of requirements of this provisions. And it also includes that they may include notice about the Agency of Natural Resources permits, for example, other permits like Act 250 as well. I can pause on that section. Otherwise, I think the thought is to move into kind of the recommendations of our report.
Yeah, why don't we hear those?
Okay, so from our stakeholder meetings, there were three general areas that emerged in which emerged as areas for right for, no pun intended, the development of proposals for a more consistent and navigable framework for regulating businesses on farms. And the first area that we identified, or the stakeholders identified, was clarifying some of these definitions that we've been working through as a group here. Whether it's principally produced, which is defined, or this concept of 50% of the products that are being sold coming from the farm is measured in different ways in different contexts, and we've gotten maybe some feedback that that's maybe more complicated than that needs to be, and both the sales metric and the weight and volume metric can be challenging to administer. We did appreciate, as we were working through this and thinking about alternatives, that it's not there's not really a silver bullet better way to do it that everybody coalesced around, but we are flagging that that these this complexity was something that came to the forefront in our discussions, and I would add that from the Act 250 perspective, we do use the weight or volume, and for us that is a little easier to it's a slightly easier metric at the point when somebody's asking us whether they need a permit and they don't have sales data, but it may be a little bit easier to kind of estimate weight or volume, but still some challenges there, I concede, but this sales data I think is a little harder to prospectively take a crack at. So another area that we had a lot of discussion about was there was some interest in allowing accessory on-farm businesses to sell more qualifying products obtained from another farm, but whether it's peaches from out of state or something from their neighbor's farm, their neighbor's eggplants, if you will. And so that, there seemed to be a desire to think about how that could be built in while kind of balancing the desire to, right now, we regulate a grocery store or a convenience store or things that sell, but the type of establishment that would sell potentially some agricultural products, but also other ones like toothpaste or things like that. Those are more squarely in the Act 250. Those are squarely kind of the types of things that Act 250 regulates. So trying to think about trying to facilitate the sale of more products, but not go too far
that it's a little more removed from the farming activity that we're trying to promote.
Do you mind if I jump in for a
Please,
second?
yes.
So the idea being that if, and I use eggplants, but I mean, you grow corn and you're selling your corn and you live next door and you've got eggplants, why can't you both sell each other's stuff? That was where we were going with that. Co-sales, it helps all farms.
So we had flagged in our report that these kind of co-sales could be achieved by changing the requirement that more than 50% of qualifying product sales need to be produced on the host farm, or by expanding permissible sales to include those qualifying products obtained directly from other farms. Or alternatively, the legislature could eliminate the requirement that all products sold in accessory on-farm business must be qualifying, and instead simply require that half of the products that are stored, prepared, or processed and sold needed to be qualifying products. And the definition of qualifying products does allow you to have some, sell some things from other farms. We also looked at, we also had a fair amount of discussion about expanding that definition of qualifying products beyond just potentially agricultural products. A number of people flagged like merchandise that would promote the farm, whether it's a hat or a t-shirt or things like that. There may be other, or you know, even now you do see sometimes in farm stands selling things that are non-agricultural products, and there seemed to be an interest in promoting that or having the regulatory regime change to reflect that was an acceptable use.
What if it's a farmer who grows or who has sheep, has organic wool, and then someone else makes the sweater, but then she sells the sweater, but it's from her wool, but someone else made the sweater? This has actually happened in Grand Isle, so I'm not just pulling this out of my, whatever, just to give you guys a hard time.
Yeah.
Can she do that?
Right now, no, right?
It's made from, I'm trying to think,
But it's her wool.
Made from products principally produced on the farm.
But she doesn't, she doesn't knit as well as this person does, so she doesn't, you want to buy pants, she'll sell you a pair of knitted pants, but she won't sell you a sweater. But so technically, if she sells a sweater, like, just, because she's my CSA farmer. And so if she sells a sweater for like the last farm pickup day because it's getting colder, and she sells that at her farm stand, is she technically breaking Act 250 rules?
I think we might want to kick that to our coordinator to sort of ask,
pulling the wrong.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is if something's been repurposed, but it came from the farm, so you have 50 pounds of raspberries that some great person turned into raspberry jam, that's your raspberries, but you don't know how to make jam, and now you're selling your own jam, but someone else made it for you.
They're a subcontractor in that case. So if you sold the jam, or if you sold the raspberries to the jam maker, maybe that would be a problem. But if
I see where you're going.
Hired them to make the jam,
got it.
May not be a
What
problem.
if they split the proceeds? Because that's what's more likely going to happen.
I think there's enough.
Are we getting into the weeds too much? I'll stop.
Appreciate the question. Yeah.
We're raising questions that don't have a clear answer. And the very fact that they don't have a clear answer, again, suggests that we asked you to do this report. And you're saying we need better definitions. So, yep, looks like we do. And B, maybe there isn't a B. So let's.
Qualifying in principle.
Yeah, I mean, you've got A, B, C, and D, but
Co-sales, right,
yeah. Representative O'Brien.
Yeah, without getting into more of a thicket, but I can see it coming up more and more in Vermont have you addressed sort of, we always talk about the farmer, but now things like the Intervale Center in Tunbridge, there's a sort of a shared farm, community gardens, if these things, can they qualify as farms? And it seems like then it gets, even more complicated as far as principally produced.
That did come up in the stakeholder meetings, aggregators.
Right,
And
yeah.
sales being an aggregator, that did come up, and there seemed to be a good deal of interest in that, to your point. And I wouldn't be surprised if you might see that somewhere, the bill coming down the pipe on it. Because it did come up,
Okay, great.
yeah.
I'm going to ask just another related question. If, going back maybe to the sheep example, and if somebody decided to sell the sweater on the farm where the sheep were raised, and somebody else came along and said, you're not supposed to be doing that, and brought a complaint, the complaint would go to the district commission?
No, that would come to my team at the legal and enforcement team, and we have two statewide enforcement officers, and there are 2 attorneys in-house, and we have regular meetings with our chair, and our executive director attends, and so we have intake on those complaints and do an evaluation of and prioritization, and look at,
And you
if they want to take
would-
enforcement action on, or give somebody a note. Sometimes we send out, our first course of action is often to send a notice of alleged violation if it does seem like they are actually, it is a violation based on the facts that we have before us, and then they have an opportunity to respond to that, or take corrective action.
So ultimately, sounds like you would be the ones faced with answering that question, and then if the answer wasn't satisfactory to one party or the other, would there be a next step, an appeal, or last stop?
Yes, there is. I mean, there are, after giving notice, there are other enforcement steps we can take. We can issue a citation. It's almost like, as it sounds, like a sort of a ticket, and it has a certain amount that there's a way of consistently calculating the amount, but then somebody can contest that or take out, there are opportunities for them to push back if they don't think that it was merited. There's a process set out in statute. Then we have some rules.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, too, if I may. So there's kind of two paths. And Allison was adequately describing the kind of enforcement path of those instances, but there's also a jurisdictional opinion path. So somebody that's interested might see that, oh, this doesn't seem like they're going along in compliance with the statute, and they may ask about that. And the path there is to go through the district commission, district coordinator, and request a jurisdictional opinion, and then that can get vetted to see whether or not it actually is within the statute in terms of development or not. And that's, a little less contentious maybe than the enforcement side, but both routes can go forward.
Not to drag this out, but that's sort of what I thought the answer was going to be, and now I understand the 2 paths, which makes sense. But then I guess I'm imagining a scenario where, depending on where you live, you could get a different opinion from the district coordinator if those coordinators don't see things the same way uniformly.
Yeah, so let me address that a little bit. One advantage of having an executive director now at the board is to help provide some of that consistency. We do meet with the district coordinators on a regular basis and talk about jurisdictional issues that come up and consistencies within the districts. So we do try to make sure that those are as coordinated as we can, so that there's consistency within the program. We also have a state coordinator who is in sort of the quasi sort of in the role of a district coordinator, as well as other hats that individual wears, and they're able to help with some of that coordination when there's issues that might be diverging in one district versus another district, and trying to make that continue consistent throughout the state.
Great.
And just, I don't know if this is more than in the weeds, but anybody can ask for a jurisdictional opinion. It could be the person who's thinking they might want to have their friend help sew the sweater and they could go to their district court and say, here's the facts, like, here's what I'm doing. Do I need a permit from you all from this? And I can decide whether they want to proceed or not with that information. Or it can also be more somebody else is seeing what their neighbor's doing and can request. But anybody who's doing a particular activity can avail themselves of that.
Representative Lipsky?
Just a comment on these clarified definitions, blah, blah, blah section. I like, quote, obtained from another farm, unquote, addition. I don't know if that's been added or it just seems from a carbon footprint standpoint, if one truck comes up with a load of peaches and it goes to 18 farm stands and now the consumer is driving by the local farm stand, which is a mile from their house, I think that's a great addition. Doesn't answer the legal question about who made the sweater versus who grew the wool. But as far as the value of farm stands to communities, I think that's a fine addition.
Representative Wilson?
What happens when somebody, a farmer or a community, doesn't ask about the rules and regulations? Is there oversight to that by neighbors or, somebody's doing something maybe not intentionally illegal, but somebody that's doing something they just don't realize the laws exist, or maybe they're cheating?
Yeah, so that's where those kind of two pathways come in. So there's, again, anyone can request a jurisdictional opinion. So that individual that's wondering, maybe I need one, maybe I don't need one. What path do I go on? They can talk with the district coordinator and find out whether jurisdiction would apply or does apply to their activity or not.
Yeah. Well, what happens if they don't ask?
And they don't ask. We are predominantly a complaint-driven enforcement entity.
Yeah.
Hey, I know that our time is as always, finite here. So it looks like a couple more slides on this presentation. Maybe we can.
Did you get through each of those? I think I didn't get through the last one, but it's pretty quick. But the last item on this slide that you may or may not be able to see was increasing educational outreach. That was something we heard from some of our stakeholders that it would be helpful to just keep getting the word out, whether or not these things get changed, just continuing to educate people that there are these definitions and they're slightly different in this context than the other, if that continues to be the case. But there is an existing provision in the same statutory section that creates the accessory on farm business concept in Title 24. And that says that the Agency of Agriculture has invested them with the authority or ability to provide education on the existence of this concept, and also it mentions flag for folks other permits may be needed. I know they're careful. They always say, we're not going to tell you whether you need one, but you should talk to the other permitting agency. So increased education was a theme. And then moving on to the next slide, more precisely defining what types of businesses qualify as accessory on-farm businesses. Some of the things that we talked about, including distinguishing between educational events on the one hand and recreational or social events on the other. I think the idea being in part that just trying to, I guess the more that it relates to farming or more clearly requires a nexus to the farming, the more likely, the more desired it was that regulate it similar to farming. And so if you were educating people about farming practices, that seemed to be more squarely in the farming camp, where some of the recreational or social events might just use the farm as their location, but not be as tethered to the agricultural activity. Another thing that some things we get questions about frequently in Act 250 world are restaurants and wedding venues and whether those constitute accessory on farm businesses. And the statute doesn't expressly state at this point, and I think there's some reasons that folks in this room maybe have more firsthand knowledge of than I do, but those are, if there is a desire to make a determination or to expressly state whether those are accessory on farm businesses, that could provide more clarity to regulators and farms alike. And then finally on this slide, defining accessory on farm businesses on a use basis would be an alternative way to determine which types of businesses do constitute accessory on farm businesses. So right now we're looking at whether things are principally produced on the farm, but there could be specific categories, like we had talked about the tractor repair or things like that. We could look at specific uses and determine whether or not or you could look, legislature could determine whether or not you want those to be, regulated like farming or regulated akin to development, as is now the case. And so finally, moving on to our final slide, the treatment of accessory on farm businesses in Act 250. Our internet connection's unstable, so hopefully folks can see this. But it's fairly straightforward. The three options, one being maintain the status quo under Title 10, where accessory on farm businesses that term doesn't really have any import in the Act 250 regulatory regime. It just relates to municipal regulation. So we could maintain the status quo and focus on educating people about what that is. And the second option would be to exempt accessory on farm businesses under defined circumstances. Some things that have come up, one thing that came up in the past was the size of the accessory on farm business, maybe the footprint, whether it's 1 acre or what have you. And another would be, another potential way to do it would be looking at whether the town has zoning and subdivision bylaws, and perhaps if they don't, then Act 250 would regulate. And then another would be to exempt all accessory on farm businesses from Act 250 jurisdiction, perhaps paired with further clarifying what that definition of AOFPs is. And I will pause there.
A lot to unpack. Yeah. We're happy to come back.
And I'm sure we'll have you back. But before we let you go now, any other last questions? Representative O'Brien?
Just one that must have come up too, because it's always getting our committee and scratching our heads. We keep hearing things, there are bills on, say, compost principally produced on the farm. Is that a solid waste thing, or is that, a farming activity that you sell? Or, what about forest products that a farmer who qualifies as a farm is selling firewood or chips that might be compost, all that. There's so much diversity going on in farming now and so many gray areas. So your job is hard.
Yeah.
We're not helping you.
There is, I'll just put as a quick side note, there is principally produced, also does come up in the compost side of things, and there is a whole statutory regime on composting in Act 250 and how that works. I didn't get into that because it was a little tangential to the report here, but I'll flag that as another side. So thanks for bringing that up.
Representative Lipsky.
Quick comment. I prefer C or B under your last slide over A.
Is it optional?
Representative Graham.
Yeah, just kind of a comment. Ag committee has been discussing all these issues for two or more years, and really have not come up with a consensus on what everything means. So, we're just as confused as you guys are. On some of them. But we got a new committee, there's a lot of new people here, maybe we'll come up with something.
Consensus.
Maybe not.
Great. Well, thank you for helping us understand the challenges anyway, better understand the challenges here. And we'll, as I say, I'm sure have you back either to see if there's any, I don't know whether, did you present everything that you had hoped to present today? You covered the material. Okay. All right. Great. All right. Well, I think we'll take a short break. We have another presentation scheduled for 2:15, 2:10, and then 2:10. And then I think what we can do is, we don't have anything scheduled after 3. We can continue to have a conversation about this if